I'm going to talk today about the disruption of the largest industry on Earth, the $6 trillion a year energy industry. So you know who I am. My background is in tech. I spent 13 years at Microsoft doing machine learning, AI, big-scale systems. I'm a science fiction author, is how most of the world knows me. So if you're interested in things like Elon Musk's Neuralink, connecting brains to machines, that's the genre that I write in. But I've also written about finite resources and the unlimited power of innovation. Can we address issues with food, water, energy, climate through innovation? And I'm an optimist that we can if we marshal our resources. And because of that, I've also become an investor. So I'll try to bring an investor's mindset. I invest in early-stage clean tech companies. So I'll try to talk here about not just the technology, but business models and business opportunities in this space. So why do we care about energy broadly? Who knows what this is? Just yell. Shanghai, very good. Anybody know what year this photo is from? 60s, somebody said. 80s. This is 1990, Shanghai. And this is Shanghai in 2013. So in a generation, we have people bootstrapping, leapfrogging from a 19th century existence to a 21st century existence. Right? And that's not just in Shanghai, it's not just in China, this is billions of people around the world. But to do so relies upon underlying physical resources, and none of those more important than energy. Energy that lights these buildings, that powered the construction of these buildings, that manufactured the goods inside of them. With enough energy, high-energy countries produce 4 times as much food per acre as low-energy countries. The right use of energy can turn dirty water or salt water into fresh water. The right use of energy can take these robotics that we have that are so amazing and make them more autonomous, more powerful, longer lasting in the field. It can take the drones that we have. I have one of these, a DJI Phantom 3. It flies for 23 minutes. That's great. It's a fun toy. The right energy technology can turn this into something that can linger all day and provide real utility in all sorts of applications. We don't have that yet today. But the way that we use energy today also has some downsides. Right? This is also Shanghai on a not-so-good day. Air pollution kills about 5 million people per year, according to the World Health Organization. In China, the north of China has 5 years lower life expectancy due to air pollution than the south. And then we have this other issue, climate change. The planet has a fever. 3 record hot years in a row, 2014, 2015, 2016. Right? And we know that we have to turn this around if we want to stay in a relatively safe zone for our planet. Or a more practical and selfish concern. For many of you, if you're in manufacturing, energy is probably one of your largest costs. In general manufacturing, energy might be 10% of costs. In some specific areas, aluminum smelting, for instance, it might be 1/3 or 40% or more. So that's a major issue for industries that have profit margins of a few single-digit percent. To be facing an energy cost that is many times that is both a challenge and a potentially large opportunity. So I believe that all of these have the same underlying solution, which is innovation and accessing the most abundant source of energy we have. The world currently uses about 14 cubic kilometers of oil, or oil equivalent, in oil, gas, and coal. But that is actually dwarfed by the continual influx of energy from the fusion reactor 8.3 light minutes away. And our sun bombards our planet with 10,000 times the energy we use from all sources combined. That means that 1 day of our energy needs is met by the content of just 10 seconds of sunlight hitting the planet. And that 1 year of our energy needs is met by the energy in just 1 hour of the sunlight that bombards our planet. And that manifests in multiple ways. It manifests in differential heating of the atmosphere that drives wind. It manifests in direct photons hitting the ground that we can harness, which is driving tremendous innovation in how we store this energy. It has huge implications for transportation and the future of oil. And at the end of this talk, I'll come back to some thoughts on how do you take action in such a rapidly changing market. Let's drill into those points one by one. Wind power. Wind power was a footnote in the global energy mix a decade ago. Today, it's about 6% of electricity in the US. That's not a whole lot, but that's a 10x growth in 11 years. Not the sort of thing that normally happens in energy, and that growth continues. Now, that growth was started by policy decisions that wanted to scale this up, but policy alone would not have had an effect anything like this if it were not for the incredible pace of innovation in this sector. Wholesale US electricity prices are around 6 cents a kilowatt hour. In 1980, wind power cost nearly 10 times that. 55 cents. There was no reason to use it. There have been very specialized applications or because of subsidies or mandates or so on. That has changed dramatically. This year, the average price of a new wind power contract in the US will hover around 2 cents per kilowatt hour. Take out all subsidies, that's perhaps 4 cents a kilowatt hour. So this, in windy parts of the world, this is now the cheapest energy you can buy at a 25 times price reduction over the last few decades. That's happening as we build these larger wind turbines that can scale higher, where the wind blows more consistently and more quickly, where as you double the length of a blade, you quadruple the amount of energy it captures. And so as we build these larger turbines, we bring down the price. But more importantly, wind power has always been seen as intermittent. But these larger turbines, made of advanced materials like carbon fiber in some cases, can also capture lower speed winds, generating electricity in more parts of the country and in more hours during the day. So we talk about a number called capacity factor, which is for an energy source, what fraction of its total peak output does it produce at any one time. Wind power used to be at 10% capacity factor. Now in the best sites in the US, on land it's over 50%, and the DOE estimates that the next generation of turbines will be at 60 or 65% over enough of the US to satisfy all of our electricity needs. So for the places where the wind blows, this is simply the cheapest power you'll be able to buy. And the scale of these things is enormous. The next generation of wind turbines have wind blade spans that are twice the size of the largest commercial airlines. That's the scale that we're talking about constructing these. So wind power prices will keep on growing, will keep on dropping. But I want to talk about solar, where the pace of innovation has been even faster. Enough photons hit the ground that with 1/3% of the world's land area and current technology of solar, we could meet all of the world's energy needs. The issue is not abundance of land or abundance of sun. The issue is and always has been economic. Covering the land, that much land, with solar panels would have cost quadrillions of dollars at one point. But that has changed enormously because of the incredible plunge in solar prices over the last few decades. Since the late 1970s, the cost of 1 watt of solar material has dropped by a factor of 200. That is unlike anything else in physical infrastructure. Transport costs haven't plunged that way. The cost of building buildings hasn't plunged that way. The cost of building factories hasn't plunged that way. This is more like the digital revolution than anything else, and this plunge is continuing. And that means that now in solar, we are also seeing crossover. By crossover, I mean the point at which, in the sunniest parts of the world, with no subsidies, solar is simply the cheapest energy you can buy. Let me show you. In the US, natural gas power is the cheapest sort of ordinary power you can buy, 5 to 6 cents a kilowatt hour. Right? In China, the west of China, the Gobi Desert, the world's largest solar company, Trina, is building a 1 gigawatt plant at about 6 cents a kilowatt hour. Palo Alto in the US signed the cheapest deal in the US late last fall. It was at 3.6 cents. Back out all the subsidies, that's 5.1 cents a kilowatt hour, undercutting the cost of natural gas in the California market. The US solar price, this is the price of actual contracts signed, has plunged by a factor of 5 in the last 8 years. India, one of the sunniest parts of the world, 3.1 rupees is the price of coal electricity. Last month, they signed a deal for 2.97 rupees, 4.5 US cents a kilowatt hour for solar in India, undercutting with no subsidies the cost of coal. Mexico, late last year, power auction, average bid 5.1 cents. The lowest solar bid was from an Italian company, Enel, at 3.5 cents. That's half the price of a natural gas plant in Mexico, unsubsidized. Chile, we've had a dozen cases where power auctions have been swept by solar, with the lowest of those in August last year at 2.91 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, that was not just the cheapest price for solar ever assigned, that was the cheapest unsubsidized contract for electricity of any sort on planet Earth with any technology ever in history. All right? That record lasted about 1 month, until in September of last year in Dubai. This is my favorite picture, by the way. This deal was signed, the second tranche of a 1.3 gigawatt plant, at 2.4 cents a kilowatt hour. This is less than half the price of natural gas in the US. It's dramatically lower than the cost of natural gas in the Middle East or Africa. And it wasn't just one company with an unusually aggressive bid. There were 4 companies that came in with bids of less than 3 cents in this auction. 4 companies that came in less than the record low price of a year past. So of course this is regional. Right? This is the cheapest energy technology in the sunniest parts of the world. In the US, that starts in the south, and especially the southwest. In Europe, it's really started in Germany, but not out of any good sort of physical sense, if you will. It's a political decision the German people made. But really the south of Europe has cheaper solar because of more sunlight. Worldwide, there's 1.3 billion people with electricity. Where do they live? Almost entirely in these red areas, in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. So those who have energy poverty today will get some of the cheapest electricity. But the counterpoint is that in the long term, the cheapest energy on planet Earth, the cheapest electricity you can buy, will be in the sunniest parts of the world. And that will have a major geopolitical impact, because today the global north is rich and the global south is poor, but the global south is about to become energy rich. Now, I told you that solar makes wind look slow. Wind power scaled by 10x over the last decade or so. Solar power has grown 100x over the last 13 years. In your intro talk, you learned that if you take something that looks like a J-curve, a hockey stick, it's an exponential, put it on a log scale, it's a straight line. This is the growth of solar on a log scale, on an exponential scale, growing at 35 to 40% per year for the last 20 years. It will slow eventually. This pace cannot be maintained indefinitely. But right now, what we're seeing is exponential growth. And that has this other effect, a feedback loop, if you will. Because one exponential law we know of is this thing called Swanson's law. And it's actually quite universal. It applies in lots of industries. The learning curve, which is that higher scale makes for lower price. This is the cost of solar, not on a scale of time, but on a scale of how big is the industry. And you see that as the cumulative production of the industry goes up and up and up on a log scale, the cost goes down. So if solar is growing, that means the cost is also dropping. If it's cost competitive in new markets, that leads to the price dropping. This is true for all exponential technologies. And it's worth thinking about this positive feedback loop, that you get to some price point that's cheap enough that you can hit some market, maybe a small niche market, but that helps you scale. And that lowers the prices. And that allows you to tap into larger markets, which help you scale, which lower the prices. So this positive feedback loop now we see clearly happening in the area of solar and wind. Now, it's not just the cost of the technology that matters. There's a whole system cost, including the labor, the land, the wiring. So when I look for startups to invest in, I look for startups that are solving unsolved problems. Today on our rooftop, the solar panel material itself is only 10% of the cost of getting it installed. So there's practical innovations happening every day. This is a company called Smash Solar that's in my portfolio that makes what they call solar Legos that just snap together, lower the labor skill you need and lower the time you need by about half. So it's a sort of practical innovation that is a business opportunity in many sectors around here. You can see how fast they're going versus the competition. So in the long term, I used the learning curve to predict solar prices a few years ago, and I got to this forecast that in the sunniest parts of the world, we could be at 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour, and in less sunny places, we'd be at 4 cents. And I'm a solar optimist, and I was wrong, because here are the actual prices over the last few years. Those stars just flew in. So solar prices are plunging faster than even those who are considered wildly optimistic about solar saw them happening. And they will keep coming down. Now you have to wonder what to do if the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. There's actually a whole lot we can do. But one thing I want to highlight that's relevant to anyone in an energy-intensive sector like manufacturing is flexibility. Google bought this company Nest for $3 billion, right? Why would you pay $3 billion for a thermostat company? Because Nest is the start of the smart grid. It makes energy consumption flexible. It allows utilities to come in and change when energy consumption happens to shift the consumption to be at less expensive times so then it produce. You can take that midday or that late afternoon peak that's very expensive for utility to supply and move it to a little bit earlier in the day, and that's worth tens of billions of dollars a year in revenue. And that affects all sorts of things. We'll see that our electric vehicles will get charged when the energy is cheapest. That's a flexible scenario, if you will. Water. We are now entering an era where desalination is becoming competitive. This is a massive desalination plant in Dubai. This plant desalinates 500 million gallons of water per day. It uses 8 gigawatts of power. Energy is half of its operating cost. Energy, sorry, is not just the operating cost. Energy is half of its cost, period. So if you can take something that is energy intensive like this and align it with when and where the energy is cheapest, then you can lower your cost. And that's true in manufacturing as well. So something we'll have to start thinking about in manufacturing is what's the variability in the cost of energy? Because the variability in the cost of energy is going to increase. Variability over time, time of day, and variability over place, over different parts of the world provisioned with different sorts of energy. And that's both a threat and an opportunity. Energy storage is the next technology I want to talk about, and storage is the new solar, if you will. You all know who this guy is? Tony Stark? I hope I didn't give away a secret identity. Elon here is introducing the Tesla Powerwall. They sold, how much of this did they sell in the first week? Anybody remember? About $1 billion in pre-sales in week 1 of this product. And the funny thing is it's not even a Tesla product or a Tesla product, but it's just Panasonic cells in a Tesla case. So there's not some sudden technological breakthrough that Tesla made. Instead, this is just another one of these areas of exponential progress, that over decades, we've seen that there's an exponential trend in battery technologies. Over this 15-year slice of time, the energy capacity of lithium-ion batteries tripled, and the energy cost per unit of energy you could store dropped by a factor of 10. And Tesla simply is tapping into the fact that now this puts it at a low enough price that it is economically viable. And so Tesla is on path for a 5x reduction in battery prices over a period of 5 years, which is faster than any forecaster ever put. So believe in the innovators more than the forecasters is one of my mantras. This also opens up opportunities for anyone that is in an energy-intensive sector, because we have this variability in prices today. Today, in many parts of the world, the midday cost of electricity is much higher than the evening or the middle of the night cost of electricity. And there are demand charges and other costs that accrue if you use too much power in the middle of the day. And that gap in Southern California, for instance, PG&E, that gap is 20 cents per kilowatt hour. And guess what? Lithium-ion batteries have just dropped below that cost. So when I talk to storage startups, this is often one of the first markets they're going after is arbitrage, if you will. Buying energy when it's cheap in the middle of the night, filling it up at your facility, and then you drain that instead of going to the grid in the middle of the day when it's expensive. And storage, lithium-ion batteries in particular, are dropping at essentially the same pace as solar. If you look at solar prices, those are the green triangles. They drop in price about 20–25% per doubling of scale. Lithium-ion batteries drop in price at almost the same pace, so 20% to 25% reduction in cost per doubling. Now, that, again, is this virtuous cycle. Batteries have gotten to a point where they're economically viable for some niche markets. That lets them scale. That will lower the prices more, and on and on and on. That's all lithium-ion, but behind lithium-ion, there's a dozen other more exotic energy storage technologies coming. I invested in a flow battery company. This company makes batteries that are big and bulky. You'd never use it for your phone or your car or your laptop, but they can run for 10 times as long as lithium-ion batteries. So they have a lower total lifetime cost. Or I'll tell you about some others a little bit down the road. Lithium-ion batteries and other storage technologies are on pace to get to a small number of cents per kilowatt hour. And that is poised to amplify renewables and get them to the point that they really are the lion's share of the energy market. And this leads to this crazy notion. If you follow all these trends, we've always assumed that clean energy would be the most expensive energy, right? We should do it for moral reasons, cut pollution. But if you look at the ever-declining cost of technology, you start to assume that, hey, if this trend holds, clean energy will ultimately be the cheapest. And even very conservative organizations are now saying this. This is the IEA, International Energy Agency. This is not what you'd call an exponential organization. Okay? I will demonstrate this. Here's the IEA's forecasts for solar over the last 15 years or so. Start from the bottom. That light blue line is the IEA's 2002 forecast for solar. 2004, they said, oh, we're a little bit off, we're going to lift it. 2006 said, we're a little bit off, we're going to lift it. 2008 said, oh, we were way off, we're going to lift it some more. 2010, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that dark blue line is how fast solar actually grew over that time. The red line, 2014, looks a lot more aggressive, right? Who thinks the IEA now has clued in to solar as an exponential growth and that their 2014 forecast is on it? You have no confidence in the world's experts on energy? Well, you shouldn't. You know who the butt of my joke is. The IEA's forecast is actually for linear growth. It projects that every year the world will install the same amount of solar as before, when in fact every year the amount we install is going up by 35 or 40%. Right? But even the IEA says solar will be the largest source of energy by mid-century. The price will be 4 cents a kilowatt hour, undercutting gas and coal, and rooftops will be unbeatable, was the IEA's words. Right? They're not the only ones. UBS put out a report a little over a year ago saying renewables are now deflationary to energy prices. And that's what's true in the US and starting to be true in Europe as well. Or my favorite of these, AllianceBernstein, private equity firm, they sent out a graph to their clients showing across the bottom here the costs of coal, oil, and gas, longitudinal. And then on the right, what's that gray line? It looks like somebody's kid took a crayon and scrawled across this piece of paper, right? That is the cost of solar dropping in the long term. And the cost of wind is not that dissimilar, and the cost of batteries is following beyond. That's when you zoom out to the long term, 50-plus years, that's what you see. And that starts to look a little bit like the sort of disruption we see in other sectors, right? Digital cameras sucked initially, poor quality, high cost, and then eventually they disrupt this whole market. And we see disruption starting to happen. Peabody Coal, the largest private coal company in the world, right, epic scale, went bankrupt over a period of 2 years. The 4 largest coal companies in the US all went bankrupt between 2013 and 2015. Natural gas had a lot to do with that, but now renewables are starting to disrupt gas as well as coal. So electricity is going to get cheap, but it's not the only way that we use energy. We also use it to move our goods around and move ourselves around. But I think Sheikh Yamani, who was a Saudi oil minister during the last oil crisis, was right. So the Stone Age didn't end for a lack of stone. Right? What does that mean? The Stone Age ended because we invented bronze tools that were just technologically superior to stone. And he's warning his fellow princes that the world is going to invent an alternative to oil, and you better be ready. And he was right. Now, oil is this incredible commodity that has this incredible flux in price. A 2% change, 2 million barrels a day flux in supply versus demand is what accounts for almost all of the price variability over the last decade. Right? And it's basically impossible to predict the short-term price of oil, but I'm going to tell you that I can predict the long-term price of oil, and the long-term price of oil is cheap because demand for oil will ultimately be shrinking, and that is mostly due to electrification. I didn't believe that a few years ago, but I believe it now. Electric vehicles are just 0.1% of the cars on the road. They're a rounding error. They are smaller than a pixel on the screen, but they're growing at 73% a year. And that's what matters in the long term. And you see what's happened. We used to think electric vehicles as clunky, not reliable, nothing that would be fun to drive. But the entire perception of this category has changed. Right? Tesla is really a computer on wheels. And so we see things like a couple years ago, thousands of Tesla owners woke up to an email saying, you have a new feature of your car. And that feature was called insane mode. There was no recall. There was no bring your car back in. It was just an email that said you have this new feature. And what does insane mode do? Let me just show you a video of what insane mode is like.
It's insane. Like, it's not like just...
What? That's perfect. Isn't that good?
That's a random, like... What's the
Because
feature?
the car is insane, right? Everyone thinks the car is insane, so why not have, you know, like an insane mode, right?
That makes sense.
So you just come to like a complete stop,
All right.
and then before you know it, you just jam on
Oh, shit, Brooks! What the fuck?
it. 70 miles an hour.
Brooks, oh shit. Yo, first of all, you can't fucking do that to people. Like, you gotta give people fair warning.
Why?
Like, you can't fucking just say,
Yeah, you can.
Brooks,
What?
I think I shitted in your seat.
Right.
So we go from this thing that's clunky, that's no good, and suddenly we're in this zone of amazement, right? That's what happened with batteries, which is what made this possible. And now you have these breakthrough prices. The Tesla Model S, $80,000 car. The Model 3 is a $35,000 car. It starts shipping in July. It accelerates like a Porsche. It has self-driving features, and it's priced like a high-end Camry. Right? We're hitting this breakthrough moment, and it's not just Tesla. You have half a dozen other manufacturers with cars coming out for less than 30,000, sometimes less than 20, with 200-mile ranges or more. And that is just blowing everything away. The EIA thought there would be 10,000, 20,000 electric vehicles with a 200-mile range on the roads by 2040. That's the red line here. Tesla sold 500,000 Model 3s already. And as we sell more EVs, we sell more batteries, the most expensive part of it. As we sell more batteries, what happens to the battery cost? It drops. And as that cost of the EV drops, we sell more EVs. And so again, we have this virtuous cycle being started that leads to the disruption of the current industry. And the craziest thing I'll say is that electric vehicles are destined to be much cheaper than gasoline cars. And that's because this is the entire drivetrain and engine of an electric vehicle. It has 90% fewer moving parts than a conventional vehicle. They're expensive because they're made as boutique objects now. When they're made at similar scale, they will be substantially cheaper than internal combustion vehicles. And we see, if we take out the current trends and project them forward, EVs like the Tesla Model 3, like a Porsche with self-driving vehicles, will be cheaper than a two-seater smart car in the coming 15 years. And we see this happening now. Beijing is going to make all 70,000 of its taxis electric. India has said they want all new cars sold there by 2030 to be electric. If we have continued growth of EVs at this current pace, we'll have 2 million barrels a day of oil demand destroyed before 2030. And then you're looking at a permanently low price of oil. And there's other advances beyond that. Lithium-air batteries that could store 10 times the energy. And other trends, as we move to Uberization, transportation as a service, that competes on price much more directly, and it competes on price per mile, which is even better for EVs. As we move to automation, people will no longer worry about charging because the car will go get itself charged when it wants to. All right, so finally, I want to close this by just asking, how can you take action in such a rapidly moving market? Okay, the Chinese pictogram for crisis is danger plus opportunity. We know lots of the dangers already, danger to the planet, danger to your business, but the opportunities are equally large. There's an opportunity to lower cost of goods that are made by lowering the cost of energy, if we're smart about when and where we use them. And there's an opportunity to enter new businesses. This is rooftop solar in the US. What led to the growth of rooftop solar in the US? Subsidies? I think there's multiple answers. There's technology, of course, we talk about a lot, and policy and business. The technology costs we've talked about already, the plunging price, the policy choices, subsidies, net metering, and then a business model innovation. Who are these guys? Solar City. Elon Musk's combined Solar City and Tesla is, what, $40 billion in market cap? Something like that right now, invented out of thin air. When they created Solar City, they didn't have any technology. They simply knew that people wanted solar but didn't have the money in their pocket to pay it. And they just took a business model idea from somewhere else. They said, we'll lease it to them, and we'll skim the profit. And that's what created this multi-billion-dollar market. And that's the sort of thing that I look for in the startups that I invest in as well. So ultimately, someone has to start that wheel spinning, and that takes leadership, and often it leads to gigantic opportunities. And for those reasons, I am an optimist about the future of energy. Thank you all very much.